Anonymous from Veracruz, Mexico. We want the Army and the Navy to know that the criminal group Zetas, who have concentrated on kidnapping, we cannot defend ourselves with a weapon, but we all know who they are and where they are. You made a huge mistake by taking one of us. We are anonymous. We are legion. We do not forget.
Not have you ever thought about how much damage a hacker community can do to a person or to groups or gangs? If we think about it realistically, how effective can a group that organizes its attacks over the internet, that is, the virtual world, be against entities in the real world? In other words, how can you respond to a magazine of bullets over the internet, by sending Dido or by adding an account? No matter how anonymous you are, you can be against the forces that rule the countries. Isn't it difficult to fight back against their deadly weapons and their armed men with keyboards that write codes and win? Yes, it is, but it is not impossible. An incident that took place in the fall of 2011, when the tree leaves turned from green to orange, the plants faded and the weather slowly became milder, is shown by a group that tried this. Almost all of them are old anti-aircraft guns made up of commandos, anti-tank missiles. It even surpassed the famous El Chapo's Sinaloa cartel in terms of size for a while. Los Zetas cartel, the world's largest hacker community, formed by the anonymous people in Can, formed by Gathering Anonymous. The war on Anonymous, the war in the cyber world. How much destruction does the war in the real world cause? A war that starts in the cyber world, moves to the real world and returns to the cyber world again. What happens if one of the most dangerous hacker communities of the virtual world and the most dangerous and cruel drug eagle hands of the real world enters a war? So, come on, while you like the video, tell you the whole story of a huge multi-fronted cyber war that revolves around the triangle of billions of dollars worth of drugs, weapons and human trafficking, hired hackers and anonymous fighting for freedom. I am Shad Craze. If you are ready, let's start. In the years when the internet was not so censored, it was freer and more uncontrolled. In the virtual world, only the world's largest anonymous, known as the hacker group, is mentioned on the internet. I could not find a single person who did not respect them or was not afraid of them, but this was only the case in the virtual world, and there were people who loved anonymous internet communities, people from hundreds of subcultures, as well as people who did not like them that much, states, politicians, companies, businesses, men and of course the drug cartels. Because in those years, the group was fighting with states, big companies and even politicians running the state. From time to time, it was shutting down state-owned websites, and from time to time, it was doing actions that caused millions of dollars of damage to big companies, and sometimes it disclosed the most private messages and emails of politicians, and sometimes it would put businessmen in trouble. They obtain private images by hacking and share them with the public. According to Anonymous, information should be accessible to everyone regardless of its content. Whether it is a decision taken by a politician, private images of a businessman, or state secrets, it should be accessible, and in any way, government and businessmen, who were not very active in the early days of the internet or did not want to direct their power to the internet, responded to these attacks by Anonymous with simple access blocks and lawsuits. And since the war against Anonymous generally remained on the internet, Anonymous was always on the winning side. This time Anonymous was going to hit a hard rock. 2011 was a year exactly as I described. Since there will be millions of people from dozens of areas living in hundreds of countries, the power of Anonymous and what it can do cannot be calculated, and the group was considered the largest and most dangerous hacker group on the internet. Remember, whoever knows his enemy is doomed to lose every war, and it was impossible to know Anonymous until 2011, because in 2011, the group he decided to launch an operation that would endanger the lives of innocent people, and start a series of events that would never end well, and, in this operation, perhaps, it would be their first defeat, and the internet was becoming an increasingly censored place. However, companies and those with power on the internet were also making the internet a more censored place. Anonymous members and their libertarian actions were constantly blocked on the internet, despite having no ill will behind it. This was the internet, which was the only place they could be free in those years. The fact that Anonymous was subjected to so much censorship and that Anonymous could not find a representative to speak to about it made them angry and took action because, in their opinion, politicians and leaders do not represent the people. The media presents people with prepared news full of hatred, injustice and bigotry. It deprives people of real information. And on top of that, many newspapers on the internet were gradually censoring the internet, which was the only place where they could get real information, as much as possible. Online, libraries were selling paid memberships, and information sharing platforms were selling paid memberships. Information was being kept by international companies, only for the profit of the rich. On the one hand, he invited people who would defend their freedom, that is, the anonymous people, to an action, and the action was simple. As a first step, the anonymous people will collect evidence about this censorship and pricing on the internet and share this evidence with their circle. This could happen anywhere and with everyone. Their families, friends, neighbors, circles. Even social media accounts are the first stage of the action. In the second stage, anonymous people, together with their relatives who support them, will distribute flyers and posters explaining the censorship on the internet and Operation Paper Storm. They will write the name of the operation on the walls with chalk and spray paint. In this way, more people will be interested in Operation Paper Storm and will stand against the censorship on the internet. The operation started with great speed around the world. Anonymous people in different countries from all over started to distribute flyers and posters about how states silenced people and censored the internet, and the bad news was not late. An anonymous flyer was kidnapped while being distributed in Mexico. This is the internet that will cause large-scale real destruction that both sides will experience in the real world. It was an operation with a provincial bullet fired from a war that will not be forgotten throughout history, that is, it lasted for months. As time goes by, the operation turns from a snowball into an avalanche. Everyone is censored on the internet, and news that will start a global operation was published on Anonymous official channel. A member of Anonymous was attacked by a drug cartel in Mexico. He was kidnapped. For the first time in their lives, the Anonymous community was faced with problems that could arise in real life due to the chaos they created in the virtual world, because the only things they had faced so far were lawsuits and access barriers. But this time, for the first time, the life safety of one of their members was in danger. The worst part is that the cartel that kidnapped the anonymous member is not just any cartel. It was the Zetas cartel itself, anonymous in the virtual world. Anyway, it was Los Zetas in Mexico. Moreover, Anonymous was much more brutal, much bloodier, much more organized and much stronger. For the first time, Anonymous had a real rival. Because the cartel we call Los Zetas is a simple one, a cartel of Mexican army commandos trained by those in the cartel. These commandos were trained by the United States to fight drugs in Mexico. Osiel Cardenas, who was the head of the Gulf cartel at the time, bribed a retired Mexican army gene to protect the Guian cartel and its leadership, and bought both these trained commandos and their high-end equipment. This new army, which was trained at a much higher level and equipped with higher quality teams than an average drug cartel hitman, called itself Los Zetas over time. In 2003, the Gulf cartel leader Cardenas, who hired them, was arrested, and in 2007, ISA was extradited to the USA, and he was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Los Zetas, whose power in the Gulf region increased over time, separated and became a new big cartel in Mexico. In 2011, the period they kidnapped this member of Anonymous, Los Zetas had grown so much in Mexico that, they had surpassed even the Sinaloa cartel, one of the biggest drug cartels of the world, in size. The reason for this growth was the cartel's advanced level of ruthlessness and paranoia. That is why they kidnapped an anonymous member. Because the cartel was kidnapping and killing everyone who was not a member of them, with the possibility of becoming a member of a rival cartel. Zetas cartel killed 72 illegal refugees and buried them in a mass grave in 2010. Los Zetas killed these 72 refugees because they thought they might become members of their rival Gulf cartel. In 2011, they killed and buried 193 people in ISA San Fernando for the same reason. To be targeted, it was enough to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. An organization with such high action power and weapon power had kidnapped an anonymous member who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. The reason why I gave such a long explanation for Los Zetas is for you to understand exactly what Anonymous is facing. Because this time, they were not faced with a state that would sue them or block access to their sites, but an organization that could threaten them directly with a gun, a cartel. Things got really heated after this point. In the statement published by Anonymous that one of our members was kidnapped, Anonymous not only said that its members were kidnapped, but also a huge Los Zetas. They were also threatening the cartel. What they didn't realize was that they were not facing states and companies that they had fought against before and whose actions were limited to the judiciary. What they were facing was a bloody drug cartel that committed crimes far beyond their own and did it as a daily job and never hesitated to take human lives. He was seriously threatening the Zetas cartel, according to what they said. Anonymous Los Zetas hacked, learned and recorded the identity information and message records of all the police officers they bribed, all the taxi drivers they used for intelligence, and all the politicians they bribed and used. And, thanks to these hacks, Los Zetas hacked all the houses, cars, cell houses, and they also obtained the locations of the armed drug warehouses. In the video where they threatened Los Zetas, they said this openly, as well as officially telling the Mexican Army and Navy that we can cooperate with you by giving this information, and they also said that Los Zetas did not release their friends and that they will publish one person's information publicly for every day. This situation is for Los Zetas. It was a terrible thing. No, the terrible thing is, of course, not that the Army and the Navy obtained this information, but by publishing this information publicly, you can buy the Navy and the Army, you can buy and stop the police, all the law enforcement forces for a certain fee, but you cannot stop the rival cartels. That is exactly what is terrible for Los Zetas. That was it. If this information was published publicly, the Army and the Navy, as well as the cartel, with whom they were rivals, would be aware of this, and they would literally become prey for their rivals, because this would turn into a hunting situation, as opposed to a war. As a result, all their rivals would know their location. But they would not even be able to guess where their rivals would come from. So things were looking very, very bad for the Los Zetas side, but Los, as a huge cartel, obviously wants to lose to a few people on the internet. The cartel remained silent for a few days, and, because of this silence, the Anonymous team made the first disclosure. It was the disclosure of Los Zetas on a website belonging to Anonymous, and he had been accused of entering into a cocaine trade for a long time and making $200,000, but if no evidence could be found, not only did Torres prove his trade, he also shared some message records proving that they didn't even think it was possible. He would say he was angry, but they couldn't figure out how to vent their anger. If it were real life, they would probably murder a few of the Anonymous members by subjecting them to the most horrific tortures, and they threatened to murder the 10 innocent captives and the entire family of the Anonymous Muse member they kidnapped for every piece of information they shared. With hundreds of millions of dollars earned from the drug, human and arms trade, Los Zetas could have hired professionals for this job and had everyone who talked about this issue followed to their door number, and the people in the cartel could have made their payments and taken the lives of these people. Moreover, the worst part is that Los Zetas had to find the journalists who had previously said bad things about them. He had previously paid the hired hacker groups and found and killed the journalists one by one. He said the kidnapped member had been beaten and tortured a lot during the captivity period, but he had no permanent damage and the Los Zetas team just let him go in order not to take any more risks. Anonymous got what he wanted, but they talked big things to their members. He was tortured, and he touched. What do you think the Anonymous members did after their friends were released? If you are expecting to hear a heroic story, I'm sorry. But you are wrong, because after their friends were taken, the group was literally divided into two. While most of them said they should continue this operation, we took the rest to risk our lives for our friend. He was saying what is the need, and the second group was more dominant. All Anonymous people were in great fear after these threats, spamming tweets saying that the operation was over, the cartel was over, and even that the operation was dead. That group was withdrawn for the first time. They were literally hoisting the white flag. This is an operation that started for the freedom of the internet. in order to save an anonymous kidnapped on the road, he was literally silenced at gunpoint and, thus the operation ended. Over the years, only 10 of the 34 main members of Los Zetas survived. All the remaining main founding members were either killed or captured and arrested. Was it the information Anonymous had that caused this? Or was it destiny? It is unknown, but still, Anonymous, cartel, which even the states have a hard time fighting against, took a prisoner, and I think it is certain that they won this war. However, do not believe everything you see on the internet, and if possible, do not get involved with the eagle. Goodbye, sir.